I've played Fallout 3 more times than I can count. Usually I just skip through the intro, the slideshow, the war, or never changes line. Then the baby scene, the birthday, the goat exam, all that nostalgic stuff. But this time was different. I was playing on an old Xbox 360 I found at a pawn shop for $20. The console smelled faintly like dust and burnt metal, and the Fallout 3 disc had someone's initials carved into it, AW. When I booted it up, everything seemed normal, until I noticed the main menu didn't play the usual music. No ink spots, no cheerful radio static. Just a low, muffled rumble, like the sound of machinery deep underground. And instead of continue/new game/options, there was only one option, rebirth. Curiosity got the better of me. I selected it. The intro started like normal, your character being born. The blinding white light, your father's voice echoing through the speakers. Are you a boy or a girl? But the screen didn't move on after I made my choice. The light didn't dim. It just stayed white. Then, faintly, I started hearing it, a baby crying. At first I thought it was ambient audio, but it didn't stop when I adjusted the volume or paused the game. It wasn't the normal baby cooing sound Bethesda used, it was sharp, desperate. It sounded real. Then the light dimmed. I could finally see the doctor's face. Only it wasn't the model from the base game. His eyes were gone. Just two dark sockets dripping something black onto his lab coat. And when he turned to my father, I realized that Liam Neeson's voice lines weren't playing. Instead, the doctor whispered something in a voice that wasn't human. He's not supposed to be here again. Next, the game jumped forward, skipping the toddler scene entirely. It loaded into the birthday party in Vault 101. But the Pip-Boy interface was missing. No HUD. No music. Just the hum of fluorescent lights. The camera wouldn't move properly. It felt sluggish, like trying to turn your head underwater. Then I noticed the other kids weren't moving either. They were frozen mid-animation, mouths open, eyes wide, like mannequins. When I turned toward the birthday cake, I realized something was wrong with Amanda. She wasn't smiling. Her head was slowly twitching from side to side, eyes fixed on the cake. I tried to interact with her, but all she said was, "You shouldn't be here again. You were already born." Then her model started to distort, limbs stretching unnaturally, face melting like plastic under heat. The lights flickered red, and the whole vault started shaking. I ran. The corridors of Vault 101 were darker than I'd ever seen them. Posters about safety as everyone's duty were torn. The overseer's announcements were looping, distorted. "We are safe in Vault 101. We are safe. We are safe." Each repetition grew slower. Then the baby's crying came back. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the speakers. It was behind me. I turned, and the vault door, the massive, circular metal door, was halfway open. Through it, I could see something glowing faintly blue. A crib. Inside it was the baby model from the intro. Except now it was sitting upright, staring directly at me. Its eyes were completely white. And when I moved closer, it opened its mouth and let out a mechanical screech, like static being forced through a speaker. Then, a text box appeared on screen. The kind used in dialogue menus, but with no name above it. Just words. You weren't supposed to come back. We closed the vault for a reason. Now you stay. The vault door slammed shut. When I restarted the console, the rebirth option was gone. It only said continue. I selected it, hoping to load into the capital wasteland, but instead it loaded me right back into the vault. Except this time, I was in the crib. And outside, I could hear the overseer's voice saying, "We have to seal it again. The child won't stop crying." After I pulled the disc out, I checked the underside. There was no label, just a message scratched into the plastic. Vaults aren't for survival. They're for containment. Fallout 3 is one of the most memorable openings in gaming. You're born in Vault 101, you grow up, take your GOAT exam, and eventually escape into the wasteland. I'd seen it all before. But this time, something was wrong. The vault seemed to remember me. It started as soon as I named my character. I always used the same one, Arty. When I typed it in, the cursor froze for a second. Then the name automatically changed to Arty again. I thought it was just a glitch, so I kept going. The birth scene loaded, but the lighting was dimmer than usual, like the emergency power was on. As the doctor held me up to the light, his voice stuttered, words repeating like a broken record. "Let's see what kind of person you'll be. You'll be." Then the screen flickered, and suddenly, I wasn't the baby anymore. I was looking down at a crib from above. Inside it was another me, smaller, motionless, pale. The game didn't advance until I pressed A. When I did, the camera zoomed in on the infant's face and the words appeared. "Load previous save?" The next scene jumped to the GOAT exam. But there were no other students. Just empty chairs and faint echoes of laughter that didn't match any of the voices from the game. On the chalkboard, someone had written, "You always answer the same." The questions were wrong, too. Instead of career options, they asked things like, "Why did you come back? How many times will you be born before you remember? Do you think the overseer forgives you?" No matter what answer I picked, the screen would flash red for a moment before moving on. After the test, the overseer met me at the door to the clinic. Only, his model was different, older, slouched, his jumpsuit stained. He spoke in a tired voice I'd never heard in the game before. "You don't understand, do you? This isn't a vault. It's a womb." He turned and began walking down the corridor. The walls were pulsing faintly, like veins under skin. When I followed him, the sound of a heartbeat grew louder and louder until the lights went out completely. When the screen faded back in, I was standing in front of the vault door. It was open, but instead of the wasteland, there was a white void beyond it, stretching forever. On the floor beside me was a pile of old controllers, all melted and fused together like plastic bones. One still had a green light blinking weakly. Then a new message appeared at the bottom of the screen. "Thank you for playing, Arty, reincarnation complete." The controller vibrated so hard it slipped out of my hands. The Xbox shut off by itself. When I turned it back on, there were no saves, no profiles, no press start. Only one line across the screen in the same font as the Pip-Boy interface. Vault 101 has recorded 1,037 births. Welcome home again. I started replaying Fallout 3 last week. I hadn't touched it in years, but something about that opening always pulls me back in. The moment you're born in Vault 101, the sterile light, the calm voice of your father, the illusion that the world outside doesn't exist, it's comforting in a strange way. This time, though, the game began differently. The Bethesda logo never appeared. Instead, the screen showed a dark hallway lined with flickering lights and a single line of text at the bottom. The Overseer requests your presence. Then it cut straight to the birth scene. The light over the doctor's table was dim, almost orange. I heard my father say, "Are you a boy or a girl?" but his voice sounded tired, like he'd been crying. When I chose boy, the doctor leaned forward toward the camera. His face wasn't textured properly. It looked stretched and smooth, like it was made of wax. He whispered something I couldn't make out and the scene jumped ahead. The next thing I saw was the birthday party. The tunnel behind the reactor room was open, something I'd never seen before. None of the kids were moving, and the only sound was the vault's hum. Amanda wasn't there. When I walked up to the Overseer to trigger dialogue, he turned around slowly and said, "She's waiting for you. She's been waiting a long time." I followed the open tunnel. It led to a small, locked door marked medical storage. The lock-picking option was already available even though my character was only 10 years old. I opened it, and the game froze for a few seconds before loading a new area. It wasn't part of the vault I remembered. The walls were covered in soot and the lights flickered red. There was a single crib in the center of the room. Inside was a tiny skeleton wearing a Vault 101 jumpsuit with the number crossed out. The baby's Pip-Boy screen was glowing faintly, showing the name Amanda. My controller started vibrating constantly. When I tried to move, the camera pulled itself downward until all I could see was the crib. Then the Overseer's voice came through the speakers, low and broken. "I told you she couldn't leave. No one leaves. Not even in death." The screen flashed white. Then it showed the birth scene again, but this time, I was the doctor. I could see my own hands delivering the baby. The name prompt appeared, but instead of typing a name, the letters were already filled in, Amanda. When I pressed confirm, the doctor's voice whispered, "Welcome back." The game cut to black. When the menu returned, there were no options. Just a single line in the Vault tech font, Vault 101 Population 1. I'd been trying to replay Fallout 3 for nostalgia's sake. I wanted that familiar beginning again, Vault 101, the laughter at your 10th birthday party, the goofy goat test. But when I loaded up the game this time, something felt off even before I pressed start. The title music wasn't there. No Ink Spot song, no static, just a faint sound like someone tapping glass from far away. The menu options were gone too, replaced by a single word, continue. I hadn't played on the system before. When I hit the button, the screen went black for almost a minute. Then I was suddenly sitting at the goat desk. No birth scene, no childhood flashbacks, just the exam room. The camera didn't move. The desks around me were empty, except for one figure sitting in the back corner. The model looked like Amanda, but her face was blurred, like an image that hadn't fully loaded. The intercom clicked on and the Overseer spoke, his voice dry and strained. "We've run this test 1,000 times. Let's see if you answer differently. The first question appeared, but it wasn't from the game I remembered. It said, if you discovered that everything outside Vault 101 was already dead, what would you do? The choices were all blank. No matter which button I pressed, it advanced to the next question. Do you still believe you can escape? The third question filled the whole screen. Why are you taking this again? The words began to blur together. The faint tapping from the menu returned, faster now, like fingernails on glass right behind my head. When the exam ended, the overseer's voice came back. Excellent. We'll adjust the memory dosage and start over. The screen faded to white and the birth scene began, but something was wrong with the timing. The doctor's lines were replaced by distorted audio of my own answers from the test. I would stay inside. I would stay inside. I would stay inside. Then I heard the overseer whisper, he's remembering. I could move the camera again, but I wasn't the baby. I was standing in the observation window, watching the newborn version of myself cry under the flickering light. My Pip-Boy was already on my arm, displaying a single stat, go to temps, 1001. When the doctor lifted the infant toward the light, its eyes opened, and they were the same color as mine. The controller vibrated, and the screen glitched back to the title screen. This time there were 2 menu options. Continue and try again. I decided to reinstall Fallout 3 last month. It had been years since I played it properly, back when my Xbox 360 fan sounded like a jet engine and you had to use discs to play the games. There was something comforting about starting over, hearing Ron Perlman's voice say, War never changes. It made the world feel distant and simple again. When I launched the game, the Bethesda logo didn't show. The screen stayed black, but I could hear the faint sound of an air vent humming. Then a text line appeared at the bottom in Vault Tech Blue, initializing simulation layer, Vault 101. It stayed there for almost a full minute before the intro began. The birth scene looked normal, at first. My father leaned over the crib, his lines played as usual, are you a boy or a girl? But his animation was slightly off, like his head was tracking something that wasn't there. I selected boy. The camera zoomed in on the baby's face, but instead of showing the usual stats screen, a new line of text appeared, player identified. Then the doctor, who normally congratulates you, turned his head directly toward the camera. Not toward the baby, toward me. His model's eyes twitched back and forth before locking into place. He said, in a voice that didn't match the game's tone at all, you've done this before. It wasn't a dialogue line. It wasn't voice acted. It sounded like a recording. A real person saying the words too close to a microphone. The game cut ahead to the toddler scene, but the controls were sluggish. I tried walking around the playpen, but the perspective kept drifting, like the camera was resisting me. I looked down at the picture book that normally opens the special menu. When I interacted with it, instead of showing stats, it opened a single entry labeled memory. Inside, each letter of the word stood for something. M was moment. E was event. M again was mistake. The rest were blurred. The page wouldn't close. The baby's hands were stuck to it. When I finally managed to back out, I realized the camera had turned toward the mirror on the wall. The reflection wasn't the baby. It was a person sitting in front of a computer screen. I saw myself. The image was low resolution, pixelated, like it was rendered using the webcam on my monitor. But it was definitely me. I moved my head slightly, and the reflection lagged behind. The game audio crackled, and my father's voice played again, distorted. "Don't look too long, son. You'll remember." The birthday scene started next, except the lights were dim and the room was empty. The decorations were all sagging, the cake was gray and unlit, and the only sound was the hum of the vault machinery. On the table beside the cake was a note. It wasn't interactable at first. I had to crouch and move the camera around to get the prompt to appear. It said, "Press start to exit." When I hit the start button, the pause menu didn't appear. Instead, the screen glitched and showed my actual desktop background for half a second before snapping back to the vault. The note on the table was gone. Then a voice whispered through my headset. I didn't recognize it at first. It wasn't the overseer or Amida. It sounded younger. My own voice, recorded badly. "Don't leave. You're not done yet." The game jumped ahead again, to the escape sequence where you leave the vault for the first time. Except the vault door wasn't opening. I could hear the sirens blaring and the overseer shouting through the intercom, but the door remained sealed. My Pip-Boy flashed red, displaying messages over and over, loading external environment. Failed. After about a minute of trying to move, the screen went black. Then a text box appeared, styled like the Fallout dialogue menu, but with no speaker name. "Do you remember the outside?" "Yes, no, I don't know." When I chose yes, the screen showed my desktop again, only now it was darker, grainy, like someone had dimmed my monitor. My webcam light flicked on. The game was still running in the background, but the menu text appeared over everything, floating freely. "Vault 101 is a simulation. You are the test subject. You will repeat until you forget you're playing." Then the game crashed completely. When I restarted it, the main menu looked normal again. Inkspot song, slow static, all that, but the continue option had been renamed resume containment. My last save was labeled observation room. The timestamp wasn't right, though. It was dated the exact time I had reinstalled the game. I loaded it anyway. It didn't start in the vault. It started in my room. My real room. The perspective was first person, and the textures were nearly identical. The walls, the desk, even the keyboard. The only difference was the Vault 101 logo stenciled faintly across my monitor screen. I tried moving the camera, but it only tilted slightly before the game froze. The last thing I heard was the overseer's voice, whispering through my headset, "You're doing very well, Subject 23. Next time, maybe the door will open." The Xbox logo appeared for a second, then the screen went black again. Now, every time I launch Fallout 3, it skips the main menu entirely and loads straight into the vault. The only thing that's changed is the number carved into the metal door. It used to say 101, now it says 102. I don't remember when Fallout 3 started doing it. I've had the same copy for over a decade, scratched to hell but still readable. Sometimes I boot it up just to hear the music and see that familiar green glow of the Pip-Boy menu. It always felt safe in a strange way. A game about the end of the world that somehow made you feel at home. But this time, when I started it, something was different. The Bethesda logo didn't fade in. It just stuttered, half a second of sound, then silence. The next thing I saw was the intro slideshow, the one with the radio playing and the camera panning through the ruined bus. But the radio wasn't playing the ink spots. It was playing static. Constant, low, whispering static. When the war never changes line came, it didn't sound like Ron Perlman. It was my voice. I thought maybe I had some weird mod installed or an old audio file corrupted. But I don't mod Fallout 3. I've never been technical enough to do that. I checked the settings, everything looked normal. I started a new game. The light of the birth scene flickered violently, like a fluorescent bulb about to die. The doctor was there, but his face didn't animate properly. He just stared down at the screen. When he said, "Let's see what kind of person you'll be," the camera turned slowly toward the ceiling instead of the baby. There was something written there, carved into the metal paneling above, "Stay inside." The next thing I heard was the sound of breathing. Not from the game, through my headset. Slow, even, close. I pulled the headset off and the sound stopped. I put it back on and it started again. When the character creation screen appeared, my cursor wouldn't move. It was locked on the name box. The letters started typing on their own. It spelled out my real name. I sat there staring at it for a while before I quit to the dashboard. I didn't want to keep going. When I relaunched the game the next day, it didn't ask to start or continue. It just loaded straight into the vault hallway. The HUD was gone, and I was moving slower than normal, like I was underwater. The PA system crackled to life. "This is Overseer Washington. The vault is sealed. All anomalies will be contained." The voice was warped, echoing like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel. I'd never heard that line in the game before. I found Amanda standing in the hallway near the reactor door. She didn't turn when I approached. When I pressed A to talk, her head snapped around instantly, too fast, and her eyes were completely black. She spoke in a calm, robotic voice. "Do you remember how many times you've done this?" The dialogue options appeared, but they were blank. Just empty rectangles. I picked the first one. The response was another whisper through my headset, this time not hers, mine again. "You keep coming back." The hallway lights flickered out, one by one, until I was standing in the dark. The Pip-Boy light didn't work. When the screen faded back in, I was in the Overseer's office. The monitors around the room were displaying my Xbox home screen. On one of them, I could see my own reflection faintly in the glass. The camera zoomed in closer and closer until the screen went black. Then the Vault 101 door appeared. It was open this time, but the view beyond it wasn't the wasteland. It was my room. I could see my desk, my keyboard, the light from my monitor. A voice came from inside the vault. "You left it running too long." The controller disconnected on its own, but the game didn't pause. My mouse moved by itself, hovering over the Fallout 3 icon on my taskbar. It clicked twice, reopening the game window. The screen displayed a single line of text in the Pip-Boy font. "Simulation resumed." I tried to close it, but every time I did, another instance of Fallout 3 opened. Each one had a slightly different name in the save file list. The first one said Vault 101_001. The next Vault 101_002. They kept going until I stopped counting. Eventually, the sound of static filled the room again, louder this time, layered with whispers. I unplugged my speakers, but the noise kept playing. When I finally forced my PC to shut down, the sound cut out instantly. The next morning, when I turned my computer back on, the startup chime didn't play. Instead, a male voice came through the speakers quietly, clearly, "Welcome back, resident." My Fallout 3 icon was gone. In its place was a new one labeled Vault Simulator. The description said, "Run indefinitely. Do not exit." When I replayed Fallout 3 last month, I wanted the nostalgia. The sterile light, the slow birth scene, the hum of the vault that used to lull me to sleep. But the game loaded wrong this time. There was no title music, no slideshow, just a faint, wet sound, like something breathing through a tube. Then the doctor's voice came in before the picture even appeared. "He's already inside." The screen faded into the delivery room. The textures were off. Everything looked too detailed, like someone had replaced the low-poly models with photographs. The doctor's gloves were stained brown, slick and moving slightly on their own, as if something under the skin was pressing outward. When he lifted the baby, the light flared white and the sound of tearing cloth filled the speakers. I expected my father's usual line, "Are you a boy or a girl?" But the voice came from the baby's mouth. A rasping whisper that sounded half underwater, "You shouldn't have come back." The camera cut out. When it came back, I was in the toddler pen. The toys were gone. The walls were sweating. Patches of flesh had replaced the metal, pulsating in rhythm with the vault's hum. Every few seconds, a drop of something dark hit the floor and vanished. My Pip-Boy wasn't on my arm yet, but I could feel the weight of it. It was cold, heavy, and pressing deeper into my wrist like it was growing out of me. I tried to move, but the baby body dragged itself unevenly, leaving streaks on the floor. The alphabet blocks were replaced with organ fragments labeled through Z. When I touched one, the screen flashed red and I heard muffled screaming from behind the walls. The game jumped forward again, to the 10th birthday party. The vault dwellers were there, but none of them had faces. Smooth, pale skin stretched tight across their skulls, mouths and eyes outlined faintly underneath. They turned toward me in unison and began to hum the Ink Spots tune that usually plays in the main menu. It was out of key and soaked with static. The overseer approached. His jaw wasn't connected right. It dangled from sinew, swinging slightly as he spoke. "We keep trying to make you right," he said. "But every time you leave, you come back wrong." He handed me a slice of cake. When the camera zoomed in, I saw that it wasn't cake at all. It was a piece of my own forearm, down to the freckles, the scar near the wrist. I dropped the controller. The screen flickered, and the piece of cake twitched and began to crawl up my arm in the game, attaching itself seamlessly when it reached the wrist. The lights in the vault turned red. The siren didn't sound mechanical anymore. It was a throat screaming, looping endlessly. The player model started convulsing, bones cracking with every step. My point of view distorted, first person, then third person, then something else, as if I were watching myself from inside the body. Every breath felt wrong. I could hear the lungs inflate but couldn't feel them move. I reached the vault door, but it wasn't metal anymore. It was a massive iris of flesh that opened and closed like breathing muscle. The numbers 101 were carved into it and bleeding slowly. As I walked closer, hands began to push through the tissue, hundreds of them, small, infant-sized, reaching out, gripping my character's jumpsuit. The camera shook violently as they pulled him forward. The final frame froze on the baby's face from the opening, its mouth wide, its eyes pure white, and then the game crashed. When I rebooted the console, the main menu loaded, But instead of new game or continue, there was only one option: integrate. I pressed it without thinking. The screen stayed black, but I could hear the same wet breathing from before. Then something warm dripped onto my hand. It was blood. I shut the console off and threw the controller down, but the vibration didn't stop. It pulsed in time with my heartbeat. When I checked the mirror across the room, the veins on my wrist where the controller had been were darker, forming the shape of a tiny number. 101. When I replayed Fallout 3, I didn't expect to feel anything. I just wanted the numbness again, the calm gray hum of Vault 101, the fake safety of walls that pretend to protect you from the end of the world. I'd played it so many times that I could almost recite every line. But this time, the lines recited me. The game didn't start with war. War never changes. It started with a voice I didn't recognize, low and hollow: "Please lie down." Then the screen went black. When the image came back, I wasn't being born. I was floating above the delivery table, watching the doctor and my father move in slow motion. The doctor's face was wrong, stretched too long, eyes like empty sockets filled with shifting static. He looked up at me as if he knew I was there and said, "The subject is lucid again. We'll try to keep it calm this time." The father's voice trembled. "He keeps waking up inside it." The baby cried. I realized it wasn't an audio file. It was the sound of breathing in my headset, timed perfectly to mine. I tried to pause, but the controller didn't respond. My vision flickered like a dying bulb, and I was suddenly in the toddler room. Everything was cleaner than I remembered. Too clean. The walls gleamed white, no seams, no doors. When I looked down, I wasn't the baby anymore. I wasn't anything. The floor mirrored back an empty silhouette, blurred at the edges. A voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere. "Every test subject insists on individuality. Every iteration builds itself differently. Every mind believes it is a player." A pop-up appeared on the screen. It looked like a Vault Tech terminal message. Subject 32, recurring self-awareness. Status, restoring amnesia. Note, memory of outside world is interference. Remove it. The words burned away one letter at a time until nothing remained. The game skipped to the birthday scene. The lights flickered, and all the other children were standing perfectly still, their shadows stretching toward me. The music box on the table began to play a warped version of "I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire," each note slower than the last. When the overseer appeared, he didn't look human anymore. His face was a smear of light and bone, his voice stretched like tape dragged too slow. "Do you remember the surface? You think you left it. You think you survived it. You think this place is real." I turned toward the vault door. It was open, and behind it was nothing but darkness. The vault floor stopped just short of the edge, like the whole world ended in a cliff of black glass. I stepped closer, and something whispered directly in my ear, not through the speakers, but right beside me. "You never left the bomb." The screen flashed white. I was back at the intro. The birth scene again. My father's voice again. The same question: "Are you a boy or a girl?" This time, the cursor didn't move when I tried to select. The question changed on its own. "Are you alive or simulated?" I couldn't answer. The screen began to pulse in time with my heartbeat. The doctor's voice repeated, "He keeps waking up inside it. He keeps waking up inside it. He keeps waking up." Then the screen went black again. When the menu returned, there were no words. Just the Vault Tech logo and the faint outline of a human brain flickering beneath it, like it was being scanned. The only selectable option read, "Begin memory loop." I pressed it. The static came back. Then I heard my own voice whispering, soft and tired, "Welcome back to Vault 101. And for a moment, just one moment, I couldn't remember if I'd ever lived anywhere else. I reinstalled Fallout 3 because I missed the quiet. The vault lights, the hum of the generators, the illusion that the world was contained. The opening had always been comforting to me. The birth, the father's voice, the sterile promise that everything outside was gone. But the game didn't start the way I remembered. There was no slideshow, no or never changes. The screen just showed the Vault Tech logo spinning slowly for almost a full minute before fading to black. Then a line of text appeared in pale green. "You're late again." When the scene finally began, the doctor was already holding the baby. The light was dim and pulsing, like it was coming from inside the walls. The baby cried once, then stopped abruptly, mouth still open. The doctor looked straight into the camera and said, "He's watching this, isn't he?" I thought it was just bad scripting, but the camera didn't move. The model's head twitched, eyes locked on me. "He's watching again," the doctor said louder. "He keeps coming back to see how it ends." The screen glitched and jumped forward. Now I was in a playpen. The alphabet blocks were gone. In their place were gray cubes with letters that spelled stop. When I tried to move, the camera turned toward the mirror. My reflection wasn't the baby, it was me, sitting at my desk, the light from the monitor bleeding through the glass. I could see my hands gripping the controller. The baby's eyes followed every motion exactly. A voice came through the speakers, slow and metallic. "You think you're playing a game. You're watching a recording. Every time you start over, it wakes us up again." The birthday party loaded next. The lights flickered, everyone silent, cake untouched. Amanda stood in the corner with her back to me. When I tried to talk to her, the dialogue menu appeared, but every option just said, "Keep playing." I chose one at random. The screen shook, and she turned around. Her face looked like it had been erased, just skin stretched smooth where the features should be. She tilted her head and whispered, "If you stop now, we all fade." "Do you want that?" The overseer's voice echoed over the intercom. "Subject has begun external interaction awareness. Proceed to containment." The screen distorted into static, but the sound didn't cut out. I could hear footsteps behind me, my characters, but they were synced perfectly with the floorboards in my room. Then the Pip-Boy clicked on by itself. The map screen showed my actual address. The quest log had a new entry, "Observe yourself." I tried to quit to the dashboard, but the controller froze. The start menu appeared for half a second and dissolved, replaced by a message. "Where do you think this stops? When you turn off the console? When you forget us? We wait in the dark until you need us again." The vault door sequence started without me pressing anything. The massive metal gear rolled aside, revealing not the wasteland but a black void with a faint reflection in the center. As I stepped forward, the reflection sharpened into a window, a webcam feed. Me, leaning closer to the screen. Behind my reflection, the walls of my room were covered in Vault Tech posters I didn't own. The overseer's voice whispered, "He's coming through." The controller vibrated once, then the screen went white. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then a final line appeared, small and trembling. You'll tell someone about this. That's how it survives. The title screen returned. The options were normal again. New, continue, options. But under them, in faint green letters, was one more word that hadn't been there before. Listening. Every time I start the game now, I can hear faint static in the background, like breathing, synced perfectly with mine.